Hello everyone, I'm Day Weather Meteorologist Don Day with your Public Lands Council weekly weather update, weather blast for this November 27th, 2021. It's being brought to you by WSR Insurance Services Incorporated. Also brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors. Well, folks, as we take a look at what's coming, these are the things we're watching for you. There's actually quite a bit of weather coming, not over the next 5 to 7 days. But as we go further in December, livestock interests in the western United States, from the northern plains to the Pacific Northwest to the Rockies, need to be ready for some changing weather. It's going to be mild, though, for another week. For another week, we're going to hold off winter for a little longer. However, by late next week, it's going to start to trend colder. And the long-range outlook continues to look colder with some snow increasing after the 3rd of December. So basically, a week from now, we're going to see a colder pattern developing, kind of an end to this very mild fall and early winter we've had so far. So stock growers, you need to be prepared. We're going to be shifting gears in about 7 to 10 days, but until then, it's going to be pretty mild. As we take a look at precipitation over the last week, the Pacific Northwest continues to be the areas that have picked up the most moisture. No one's really gotten a lot. We actually had a little bit of moisture in the Four Corners, and this area right here has not seen much of anything lately. It wasn't much, but it was good to get a little bit of precipitation. And you can see across the Great Basin, Central and Southern California, pretty dry. Pretty dry also along the east slopes of the Rockies. Just not a lot of moisture coming our way. And if you were to look at the comparison to normals, you can see that even though there was precipitation, below average amount. So we've trended drier here over the last week, and that is reflected on the U.S. Drought Monitor, although we do have a couple of areas that have seen some small improvements, but drought conditions continue to have a very, very firm grip on the area, although we continue to eat away at the drought in Washington State as that onslaught of colder, wet weather up here in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest is slowly but surely making a bit of a difference, but only in those far northwest areas. We've seen a problem here with drought conditions, at least conditions getting a little bit worse over the last week, with dryness across the southern Rockies and parts of the southern plains. However, we've seen some small improvements in these green shaded areas here. These are very modest improvements, but the recent moisture there has helped out a little bit in those areas. Now let's take a look at what's unfolding. This is how we're going to start the weather pattern. Basically, what we've had for the last week will continue for another week. A westerly flow bringing mild air from the Pacific across the lower 48 states. The cold air, and I mean it's cold. They are having very, very cold weather up in Alaska and up in the Northwest Territories in the Yukon. It's been very, very cold up there, very, very cold back up into Siberia, but the jet stream, since it's moving so fast, is acting like a big barrier from allowing that cold air to get much further south than the U.S.-Canadian border. It's being held at bay. So this is keeping us mild. It's keeping the rain and snow focused in British Columbia on the far Pacific Northwest. However, what will happen is this current pattern by a week from now will shift. And what we're going to start to see is the jet stream taking a bit more of a dip, allowing the winds aloft to come more from the Gulf of Alaska and Canada into the central and western areas of the United States. So we are going in about a week to start to get colder. With those colder temperatures will be some snow chances. Now, it doesn't look like over the next week with new precipitation. Again, Pacific Northwest along the U.S.-Canadian border here is where it's going to be the most wet. However, you see this little area of moisture coming further south? This is the beginnings of that colder air coming on in and maybe some light up snows by next weekend along with much colder temperatures. Now, let's take a look at snowfall over the next week. It doesn't look like much, but with our next update, we're probably going to see the snowfall get much, much further south as that cold air begins to spill south out of Canada, the Yukon, and the Pacific Northwest, and up in the Alaska region. That cold air begins to move in. So while over the next week it's going to be very warm, these are the temperatures over the next 7 days relative to average. So you can see the whole western United States is going to have one more week of average to above normal temperatures. However, we're going to see this reverse as we get into the latter part of the forecast period, mainly as we get a little bit further into December. It is going to start to trend much colder. Our next update will be the 4th, and we'll have more details on this change to much colder weather in the western United States. Until then, enjoy the relatively mild temperatures.